Hey everyone, it's Tyler here, back again after another crazy week. I just wanted to take some time to talk with you about this topic today because I've been talking with a lot of different organizations recently that are either in public cloud or thinking about adopting it. And I just want to provide you a little bit of clarity around this topic. First off, by getting into what is public cloud and then going through the benefits and seeing if it's actually a right fit. Whether you're a business leader or engineer, I think it's important to know what public cloud is and what it isn't. I've talked with maybe 100 plus organizations over the past year that are already using public cloud or just thinking about adopting it. And from those conversations, I can still say that there are so many organizations that are struggling to realize the value of public cloud. I think they were sold a data center for rent, and a lot of the cost benefit that they were expecting just never materialized as they imagined it would. And the reality is that public cloud is a platform that you're adopting, and it has benefits, it has downsides, it has all those things. And so if you're not sure about what those things are and you're not planning for it, it can be a real headache and it can be a real big expense. It's not intended to be a cure-all solution, but it can be an excellent investment if you know what you're doing and you have good alignment and understand those benefits. So let's start out with what public cloud actually is. And I'm just going to give you a very businessy definition of it. I know it's going to be overly simplistic, but I want to focus on and emphasize that this is really about the money at the end of the day. This isn't just IT tech that's cool to use. It is about actual business value. And so the definition I'm going to work off for the rest of this is that public cloud is a platform where you rent IT infrastructure over the internet and pay on an as needed basis. I think that's a real simple definition. It's pretty common that you'd see among various cloud service providers that they would say something similar to that. And that's what I'm going to be using today as we go forward. Because really, as I said, I don't want to get into the IT definition of every single thing here. I'm here to talk about it in business terms. So first off, I want to talk about public cloud as a business model, right? And first off, people are probably thinking, okay, well, it's IT tech. You know, we're adopting a platform that's supposed to be IT and supposed to be replacing all that. It's a business model change, and I'm going to explain to you a little bit why it's a business model change. It is because it introduces some fundamental changes into how the business actually runs its IT. And it does this because of what we call the shared responsibility model, which essentially divides responsibilities between a customer and the provider itself. So the provider is responsible for a lot of the physical infrastructure, the underlying infrastructure there, the patching, many of that stuff. And then the customer is responsible for all the data that's in the cloud, everything they're using and consuming, right? And so in the process, what this does is it introduces a change to the traditional capital expenditure or CapEx model of making large periodic investments in IT infrastructure. Users of public cloud subscribe to the operational expenditures OpEx model, which is a consumption-based model, and it is a true pay-as-you-go. So there's a few things that happen here. So this increases the importance of attribution of cost to whoever's doing the spending. It introduces increased understanding of how and why things are consumed, because you can literally see it on paper. It's not just we bought a router, we bought a server, and we're running a bunch of stuff on it, right? So everything is mapped for the consumption that's done. And really what it gets at is an important understanding of how IT drives margin in the company, because the cloud is very closely tied. The public cloud requires a true alignment between finance and IT. And without that, public cloud expenses can get pretty unwieldy. And if you don't understand that going into it, it's going to be a huge pain, because finance is going to be very interested in what is being spent in public cloud because they want to make money at the end of the day. So if you don't understand how that model is about to change, it's going to be a real difficult undertaking. So to understand this business model and why you'd want to go towards it in the first place, I just want to talk about what some of these public cloud benefits are. And I took these straight from AWS. I don't want to make them complicated. I want to give you it from the horse's mouth, right? So the first one that is probably one of the biggest benefits of getting into public cloud is the aspect of scalability. And when we're talking about that, we're talking about both vertical and horizontal. Your ability to rapidly resize your resources from small to large, but then also to distribute them across a very large area, right? You can distribute those across multiple data centers, across multiple availability zones, multiple regions, and you have really pretty much as much scalability as you want to have within reason, right? In cloud. And the way it does this is because of, you have these economies of scale because you're sharing tenancy, you're sharing resources with all these other people. And that's why it works. And so, the scalability here is not necessarily geo-restricted. There's places that the cloud isn't, but for just what we're talking about today, assume there's a lot of locations in many different continents that you can put your resources. And also it just reduces the time to scale. Think about the process of going through and having to order all that equipment and put it in those data centers to have a team run it and do all that work. Cloud simplifies that. It allows you to scale at a much faster pace than you'd be able to achieve if you were trying to do it yourself with the budgets that you have and the resources available. Another thing that it introduces, and this is another benefit, the one that most people probably come to it for, is supposed to be cost efficiency. And it does this because of the pay-as-you-go model. In theory, pay-as-you-go should be the cheapest way to go, because if you've optimized all your resources, you're using exactly as much as you need and doing all these things correctly, you should be paying less than you would theoretically in owning a data center. But the reality is that in a lot of cases, people don't know that information. And so they get on the cloud expecting those resources to be consumed and for it to be cheaper, and it doesn't work out the way they think. The benefit of cost efficiency that's supposed to give you is economies of scale. Like I mentioned earlier, many different people are using this infrastructure. You're all sharing it. And so the cost for everybody to share the infrastructure brings it down to a lower price. And that's the benefit you're supposed to be getting from it and through this shared tenancy. But as I'll explain in a little bit, and as we go more in detail, that cost efficiency can definitely be lost if you don't actually understand how cloud is going to provide that for you, and make the necessary changes to allow those benefits to happen, right? Another thing that public cloud benefits organizations with is a faster time to market. So theoretically, once again, a faster time to market. So from the time that you have an idea and you have the ability to build IT infrastructure, you can scale it, grow it, and do a lot of things that you wouldn't be able to do if you were getting your actual infrastructure and building it yourself, right? And once again, this is a theoretical exercise, but I can say that pretty much for anybody who wanted to stand up a website or build a server or just build infrastructure right now, if they wanted to do it, they would be able to do that much faster in cloud than they would any other way. And that's what I think they're getting at right here when we're talking about faster time to market. I know there's some crazy 10x engineers that might be able to do that faster than they could do it in cloud, but that's what I'm talking about. Another thing that I want to bring up here in terms of benefits is reliability. So when we're talking about reliability in the cloud, we're talking about using resources distributed across various data centers. So you have all these different resources that are in separate data centers that are all manned. You have teams that work on those, and you have those resources that you can spread across a big area. And there are service level agreements that are provided for that infrastructure. And so if there's outages, things that go down, you're not going to be the one that's going to be doing it yourself. You're going to rely on a team of AWS engineers that are going to go in and perform that work. And so that's a different model than you'd obviously be doing if you're doing it in your data center. And also your ability to distribute those workloads anywhere you want at a price. When we're talking about reliability, you want to design so that your workloads are sitting in actually physically separate areas. So if one area is impacted, it doesn't bring down all the rest. And that's a pretty typical cloud convention. You can do it without doing that. You can put everything in one. It's just not recommended. So when we're talking about reliability, it's from that perspective. And then finally, and this is maybe a more recent introduction into AWS's terminology, but the sustainability. So more people using the same hardware resources like we were talking about with a shared tenancy, but there's also energy efficiency of having a well-built data center, running it by teams that can afford the best equipment to do this, and then overall less hardware that needs to be used and recycled eventually, just for the fact that people are getting better utilization out of all the equipment that is being used instead of buying separate pieces of equipment that are all getting 20, 30, 40% utilization. So we're talking about some of the benefits of public cloud. We are talking about scalability, cost efficiency, faster time to market, reliability, and sustainability. So those are the big five that I'm going from, as I said, straight from AWS, from the horse's mouth. And so the real question you need to ask is, when you hear all those benefits, do you need those benefits? And can your apps actually make use of them? And this is where I see a big divergence. There are plenty of use cases for cloud, but very often I think, as I said, organizations get into cloud expecting the cost efficiency is the main one, but that is part of the design process. And if your apps don't use and make use of the cloud in the best way, then you're not going to yield most of those benefits, and you're actually just going to end up paying for those benefits without getting the efficiency of them. So some bad scenarios that I see for customers that are coming into the cloud is that if you are running static workloads 24/7 with very little change in utilization, with no need for the scalability it offers, it's probably going to be a waste of time and money. And I just want to be as blunt as possible in that, because I see plenty of customers that do a lift and shift. They have a data center renewal or something coming up and they want out, and cloud is an easy way to get out of that and go somewhere else. And a lot of times, the lift and shift happens and then they're still running these workloads 24/7. There's not a lot of growth there. And what happens is they just end up paying a ton of money. And so I think it's very easily avoidable if you understand when you move to the cloud, there's things that have to change, right? Part of that, and this goes into my next point, is if you lack the internal skill sets to do it, to learn cloud, and you can't afford to hire people to perform that job, and you don't have any money for upskilling your workforce, cloud is going to be a really tough sell. In fact, I think you're going to end up paying a ton of money and you're not going to yield really any of the benefits if you do that. And I do see, this isn't as common, but you will see organizations that will go into the cloud. There's no upskilling. They don't even hire for people. And it's really just network engineers and devs trying to run it. And it gets really frustrating really quick. So I think that's something to really push back on if you hear a push for cloud coming, and that's the reality that you're in, right? If your business runs comfortable on a CapEx model and there's very little desire to go to an OpEx model, I think it's worth pumping the brakes there on going to cloud, because most of the benefits you're getting from cloud are in the OpEx model. So if you're used to CapEx expenditures, the cloud model itself is big and different from that. And there are ways to make things that are more CapEx in AWS or any of the other cloud providers by doing things like reservations, paying up front for services. But by and large, the benefit of cloud, like I said, is the pay-as-you-go model. So if you're optimizing, you're trying to use as little as possible, then you're going to want to try to make use of OpEx wherever you possibly can as well, to be able to really utilize things cost efficiently. Also, if the projected growth of your apps is small, you're not seeing a lot of growth. It's very like small to moderate, and maybe these are like internal apps. They're apps that are just used by the business, but they're not really driving revenue and margin for the company. Moving to a cloud might or might not be the best choice for those two, because what you'll often see is apps don't get modernized, they don't get scaled, and so a lot of the benefits that people would expect from putting those apps on the cloud infrastructure just don't end up being very profitable, or maybe it's a break even, or it's just not as wow as people are expecting. And I think that's another one that you should push back on if you hear a move to cloud with those circumstances. If there's no intent of modernizing IT infrastructure at all, I usually push back and say this is not a good way to go into cloud. The point of cloud is to make use of a lot of these cloud native capabilities. You don't have to use all of them. You can use third-party tools, you can use other things, but if there's not going to be any modernization, it's going to be really difficult to effectively make use of everything in cloud. And so it's worth asking the question, why are we going to cloud if you don't want to modernize? There are always exceptions and good reasons for why not you should go to cloud. And I don't want to use any of these as a limiter and be like, definitely don't go, if you're doing this. But it's worth having the conversation and knowing those requirements going into it, because it's really easy to get on cloud without understanding those benefits, and it's very difficult to get off. And I'm already seeing customers that are going the other direction, and I just want to help people avoid that if possible, or make better use of the cloud investment they're already in so they can not have to do that and not have the frustrations that come from it. And if you just don't do your planning, I think the bill is going to shock you. And that's what I'm seeing with customers. So that's the stuff I need to share with you right now. On the other side, and these are some good scenarios that I see, going into the next year, I think people are still going to be looking at how do we move into cloud, right? And this conversation is a good one to have. But as I said, there are some scenarios that are better and worse. So here are some good ones that I see. So if you want a DR option that is cheap and reliable, cloud might actually be a great cost-effective way to do that. I see DR frequently as a use case, and it often involves, hey, we're closing down a data center and we want to put this new one in the cloud. That's actually a really good scenario for it, and I think it's worth looking at if you're using something like a Zerto, or even if you want to just leverage some of the native stuff like Azure Site Recovery or AWS Elastic Disaster Recovery, some of these new tech. You can move your workloads there. It's probably going to be cheaper, especially if you're doing stuff like Pilot Light or just a simple backup and restore. That can often be cheaper for cloud. Also, if you want dirt cheap storage, you just want to do very simple backups or put files up there, you want to archive, you want to make use of that, cloud is really cheap. It's probably cheaper than owning your own servers. And if you really understand the data that you're putting into the cloud and you understand the retrieval rates, it can be really, really cheap, even for large amounts of data. So if that's a reason why you're considering to go to cloud, definitely have the conversation about it because you might be onto a good thing. If you have cutting edge, rapidly scaling workloads, you have no idea how much they're going to have to scale, your business is growing, all that stuff, cloud might be the best place to house your workloads. Often when you see customers coming with this kind of ask, the thing is that the hardware can't actually keep up. So they almost need to build in a way that allows them all that scalability. And what you'll see from that is they'll get on the cloud and they're just going to like build like crazy, right? And it'll run up the bill. But the thing is they had no idea going into it how much hardware they needed. So it actually ends up being advantageous. And then they get to the point where there's a sort of a baseline or they figure it out and then they start optimizing and bringing that bill down as they go. And at that point, you can make better decisions about whether or not you want to stay in cloud or if you want part of your workloads to remain in cloud. But that can be a really good use case if you have very quickly scaling workloads and you just don't know how much resources are going to need to be consumed. If you need access to GPUs, I guess this is kind of a new one for AI ML workloads. Cloud right now is probably one of the cheapest ways to get in there. I don't know. I'm not super close to the space as far as AI goes, but when I'm looking at that, the cost efficiency of being able to buy GPUs instead of having to buy them for your own data center, it seems like cloud is a pretty good option to keep in there. So if you're looking at more AI ML workloads in the near future, I think cloud could be a good use case for that as well. If you have a giant multi-regional international footprint and you're just trying to simplify your ability to stand up resources in locations that are close to your customers and you want to be able to manage them all from a single place, cloud might be your place for that too. Because what cloud allows you is to be able to build all those different resources as close as you can to those customers, right? And to be able to distribute that over a really large land area that would otherwise be very difficult. And so having that flexibility and ability to do that makes sense for organizations that are operating over a large geographic area. And I would definitely have the conversations if you're one of those companies, and maybe it's a variety. Maybe you have a few data centers here, you keep a main data center, you have workers all over the place that might be connecting with VPNs, but you're going to run into latency issues if you keep a main data center that everybody in the world has to connect into. And so at that point, maybe it's better to move some of those resources a little closer to the people that need to access them, in which case cloud might be the better solution, right? So there are many great reasons to use cloud. I don't want to restrict you to just these. There's plenty of other ones. I have conversations all the time with customers that are coming to cloud for other great reasons. Those are some of the ones that I found off the top of my head. I think that people have a lot of success with. And so, if you can figure those out and you can decide that, those are the benefits you're going to actually be able to get from your workloads, I think cloud could actually give you what you're looking for, right? So after all that said, I just want to wrap it up. That's it. I needed to share that with you because I think this is going to be one of the biggest conversations in 2024 as businesses move to cut costs and find ways to make money, right? Cloud can provide some serious benefits, but it should be tempered with realism and a good understanding of what those are and how your applications and business actually can get the benefits, right? So if you found this helpful, please share this with other people. Make sure this information gets out. I just want to help as many people as possible when they're considering cloud, and maybe hearing some contrarian advice might actually be the most helpful thing too. But anyway, thanks for your time. I'll see you in the next one and looking forward to chatting.